So welcome to video number 3 of module 1. First of all, I'd like to thank you for even getting this far in the course. You probably wouldn't be surprised to find out studies show that only 10% of people who buy books actually finish the book all the way to completion. It's probably even worse with multimedia courses such as this, where you have a big box of stuff and it can be somewhat overwhelming. So thank you, first of all, for going this far, right? And I think now you're probably starting to see some of the pieces come together, especially with these 4 components and this money magnet thing. And it should be fairly common sense to you right now. So I know nothing I'm showing you is really revolutionary, but it will be. All right, so we're laying some foundation here. So what I want you to do right now in this video is homework. Yes, I know it. Can you believe it? I never thought I would actually say this in my life. Here's your homework. But I've prepared some homework exercises for you, and it's vitally important that you do this, okay? They're not going to be unpleasant. It's not like you have to do any word problems or anything here. But do it. I got 2 assignments for you, and I'm going to show you the little video that's about to follow here that walks you through them, and the assignments are in your handy-dandy manual. So they're all printed out for you. The video might reference PDFs, but again, I've cleaned it up a little bit and made nice little manuals for you to go through. Just do them, okay? Do the homework. All right, here's the explanation of the homework, the official assignment. I'll be checking these in the morning. There will be a quiz. If you don't do them, you're in trouble. Detention. All right, see you.
Well, I got to tell you, I never in my life thought that I would give homework. I was never any good at doing it, but I kind of like giving it. Now, this document you see is your first assignment. It's a 7-page document, but it's not that hard. Lots of it is just my explanation of the assignment, and I want to go over it in this video for you as well, just to make things a little bit clearer and a little bit easier. What we want to do here is just brainstorm. So, based on the video you saw, where you saw my first ever attempt at making a bunch of money, I want you to brainstorm ways you could copy the process I just outlined. So, our first step, let me move my camera here. There we go. Our first step is to create interest and desire, right? And in the example that I gave you, I showed you how Ed and I used newsletter PDFs, and you see I have newsletter in quotations here because they were really mainly just pitches with a little bit of content wrapped around them. But we use newsletter PDFs to generate interest and desire in the market. So I'd like you to brainstorm 3 topics that you could write a quick newsletter PDF about. So in one of my businesses, I have a dog training business. So an example would be I could write an article about a common training mistake, which is punishment and scolding, also known as negative reinforcement. And I could include things like talking about how one huge mistake is punishing your dog for good behavior. And an example of this is when your dog runs away, you call him repeatedly and chase after him, and then he finally comes to you and you yell at him for running away, right? But in the dog's mind, he's actually thinking to himself, man, I just came to this dude. Why is he yelling at me? This is so uncool. And therefore, he's like, I don't think I'm going to come to this person anymore. Dogs don't understand that you're mad at them for running away in the first place. They just think that, hey, I come to this guy, I get yelled at. This is not cool. And then I might talk about negative reinforcement in general and why it doesn't work. So I explain how negative reinforcement causes your dog to fear you, and I give examples of why it works and how it works, and I'd also make the reader feel just horrible for committing common training mistakes like maybe scolding your dog sometimes. Then I would talk about the methods my product uses, and I'd leave the reader wanting more. So if I were doing this, the answer to my question would be punishment report. All right, I wouldn't write out this big thing that I just wrote for you in the assignment. I would just put punishment report. But I just wanted to give you, through all of this up here, I just wanted to give you how I came up with the punishment report idea. So I'd like you to write down 3 topics that you would write an interest and desire type PDF about. And listen, if you don't think you can write about 3 topics, I just want you to write down what you would write down if you could write about 3 topics. So if you're concerned about it, just pretend for a minute that you're the best writer in the world and that you love writing and that you thrive on writing and it's the funnest thing ever. And if you were that person, what were 3 topics that you would write about if you could? See, no problem. It's easy. All right, so now I'll scroll on down. During this process, you will probably come up with some sticking points. You might say in your mind, oh man, I don't have time to write, or I don't know what to write about, or I'm not a good writer, or I'm not an expert, or whatever. Some sticking points or some mental objections that your mind might kick out when you're doing this assignment. So I want you just to write down 3 of them. And if you don't have 3 sticking points, I want you to think about what would you have if you did have sticking points, and then you can write those down. Really easy stuff. And then, I know that we're talking about sticking points to getting this done here, but I want you to now in this little section think, okay, well, if I was the world's greatest expert, or if I was best friends with the world's greatest expert, smartest person in the world, what would I do to overcome these sticking points? I know this is kind of silly, but I just want you to humor me and write them down anyway. So write down what your potential solutions would be. Even if you don't think you have any solutions for these sticking points, just write down what the solution would be if you did have solutions, or if you did know the smartest person ever, which would be, I guess, President George Bush or something. And what would he do, right? And so you could write that down. All right, so our next step, if you'll remember from the other videos, step 2 in the whole mass control element was bonding. So in our example, I showed you how I did that teleseminar with the FTC, or not with the FTC. I just did lots of correspondence with the FTC, but never did a teleseminar with them, fortunately. And the goal of that teleseminar and what it accomplished was these 4 things. That particular teleseminar that we did, it got the big glaring problem out of the way. And like I told you earlier in the video, everybody knew I'd been sued by the FTC, and I had kind of a sketchy reputation there. So I was able just to come right out with that and just give that glaring, damaging admission and just get it out of the way. Otherwise, it would fester and people would always wonder about it. And I was able to use that bad situation, turn it around, and create an instant sense of empathy with the listener. And the reason I was able to do that is because many internet marketing prospects are on the verge of total financial ruin. I can't tell you how many emails I get. They're like, man, I'm down to my last 75 cents. What can I do to make $1? And that's not funny, actually. That really happens a lot, and it's not cool. So I was able to instill instant empathy with my listeners because I was there, right? That was actually happened to me too, and I gave the harrowing story. So I created that he's been where I am now type of experience in their minds, which is what I was going after. And it also gave the listener a great sense of hope because I told how, despite how I was completely devastated and ruined and embarrassed and made out to be a total criminal, I was able to grow my business even stronger than what it was, thanks to the underachiever method that we talk about in that teleseminar. And finally, I created more interest in the underachiever method because I also gave them a brief overview of what it was all about, and I gave examples of the money I was making. So that was our teleseminar in a nutshell, right? So I know you might be wanting some more examples, and I want you to, at this point, also imagine that Saddam Hussein had a giant missile pointed at your house. I just wrote this, and it's still funny to me. I hope it's funny to you. I like to be silly, as you can tell. And the only way he's not going to press the button is for you to either hold a teleseminar or record an audio that creates a sense of bonding with your market. So if you're shy and you're weirded out, you don't have to actually talk to anybody on the phone if you want to. If you don't want to, you can just record an audio, kind of like I'm recording something for you now. So all you have to do for this section is write down the topic. So I'll walk you through another example. It's kind of one that I wrote down on the fly. As you know, I have a dog training business. I have a business that sells dog training materials, I should say. So with that business, if I were to do this kind of thing, I would want people to know that I'm a real person and that I love dogs and that I know what I'm talking about. And I'd also want to create a sense of instant empathy with them where they say, hey, this guy's been where I am, right? He's done stupid training things and he's had a bad dog as a result and he's been embarrassed and the dog has jumped on people and all this kind of stuff, right? So I would simply tell the true story about how my first real job was working as an installer and trainer for a company called Invisible Fencing. This is true, by the way. I don't know if I've ever told anyone in the marketing crowd this. That was my first real job where I wasn't working for my family. I actually started working when I was 14, but my first out of college real job, So if you're not familiar with what invisible fencing is, that's the product where someone comes to your house and buries this little wire in your yard, kind of like as if it were a fence going around your yard, and the wire gives off radio signals, and the dog wears this little collar, and if he gets too close to the wire, he'll get shocked, and hopefully he'll turn around and run back in the yard because he's like, man, I don't want to get shocked, right? So in this teleseminar, I would tell that when I got started, I didn't know anything about training dogs, even though I'd had plenty of dogs as a kid. But my job was to be the guy that installed these fences and trained the dogs, right? So that's kind of crazy. And then I'd talk about how the company told me to train the dogs by trying to get them to cross the wire and then get shocked and then go back in the yard out of fear of getting shocked, which is negative reinforcement. And I would explain that I was really bad at my job because the dogs kept on getting out of the yards even though they were getting shocked. And then I go on to tell the story that how out of sheer desperation I tried a new method where I trained the dogs to enjoy staying in the yard as opposed to training them to fear leaving the yard. In other words, I would just say that I basically used positive reinforcement instead of negative reinforcement, and then once I did that, the dogs stayed in the yard. So I give that little story there to help people bond with me and know that I was a real person and know that I knew what I was talking about when it came to dogs and that I had a little bit of history in this. And then I would wrap up by talking about the incredible benefits of using positive reinforcement, which of course is what my product is all about. So my answer to this question here would be simply invisible fence story. I just gave you this long lead up to it just to kind of give you an example of how one of these would be laid out in a little niche market. So the next section, let's see, there we go, of this is again where I'm asking you to come up with some potential sticking points that might enter your mind of why this might be hard for you to do, and just write them down. And again, this is real easy, like no big deal. No one's going to grade you on this or anything like that. But if there are any mental objections your mind throws at you, like, man, I don't know how to talk, I don't know how to get a teleseminar line, or how do I make an auto recording, or any of that kind of stuff, just write it down as a sticking point. And then, hypothetically speaking, what could you or the world's greatest expert do to overcome these sticking points? And I want you to write down 3 solutions that you could possibly do or the smartest person in the world could possibly do. And then moves on now to step 3, which is our proof element. So if you remember looking at the diagram I showed you, step 3, or the third component that we use, is proof. It's a little bit different than social proof. In this case, I want to use proof showing that the stuff works. So with Underachiever, we used recorded interviews to show that the underachiever method worked. We used interviews with our successful students who'd attended the seminars. We had Mel's interview on Australian radio, and all of that was really giving testimony to, listen, this stuff is great, it worked for us, and we're just regular people, which is perfect. So ideally, and this is important, ideally your proof magnet should be able to hold its weight alone. So even if somebody wasn't familiar with you, your product, or your story, they could get this proof magnet and they would be drawn in, they would be intrigued. So in the underachiever example, if someone were to listen to Mel's interview where she's talking about, this dude showed her this crazy technique on the internet and now she has a wedding site and now it makes a lot of money, even if you didn't know me or Ed or didn't know anything about the underachiever method, you would still listen to that interview and be like, man, that's really interesting, that's cool, what's this all about? So you want your proof element to be able to stand on its own 2 legs. So I want you to, in this section, write down 3 things that you could use as your proof magnets, and then again write down your sticking points and your solutions. And then our 4th step is a sample. So if you'll recall, in the underachiever thing, we gave them a sample, and that was me on stage live talking about how I got the product made. And it's important that your sample is information they can immediately use, like that example. It's something they could immediately use and put into action. They could, if they wanted to, take the knowledge I gave them, go get a product made, and have it on the internet. Or it could be useful but incomplete. And you'll probably be familiar with useful but incomplete when I put it in the context of a marketing seminar. You know how you go to a lot of internet marketing seminars and you have all these experts get on stage and they tell you about some really cool method, but they don't tell you how to do it? That's useful but incomplete. So your proof element could be useful but incomplete, but preferably something they could immediately use. And in this section, you only have to write down 1 thing you would give away as a sample, but I do want you to do the sticking points and solutions just like you did earlier. All right, so this brings us to, hang on while I pull this up on the screen, the second assignment. Yes, there are 2. As if 1 homework assignment was not enough. Now we have the second assignment. And this one is, whoops, hang on. You don't see it on camera because I have a zillion monitors going on over here. Where are you? UA2 assignment. I'm looking for the PDF version of this so it won't point out all my misspellings. Here we go. All right. Aha. Now what I'd like you to do is, after you do assignment number 1, just chill out for the rest of the day in terms of assignments, and do this assignment tomorrow, because I want your brain just to kind of digest a little bit what you just did. I don't want to overwhelm you and freak you out, even though this is kind of minor, but nobody likes homework, I get it, but this is about making money and not reciting stupid stuff that teachers tell you, so it should be a little more palatable. Is that all right? Is that a word? I think so. It is now. Okay, so for assignment number 2, we want to pull all of this stuff together, because in my sales letter for Mass Control, I promised you that I would teach you how to create your launch plan or your plan of attack. This isn't only about launches. So now we want to really kind of get that going. So if you remember in the very first video, the very first thing that you saw in the outline that Ed and I had was we set a date. So I want you to put your target money getting date down here. You don't have to stick to this date. If you miss the date, no one's going to come to your house and kick the dog or anything. But I still want you to put a date down. This isn't the date that you get started doing stuff. This is the date that you want people to begin giving you lots of money. All right, so now I'll scroll down a little bit here. If you remember, in the first assignment, I had you write down the 3 interest and desire magnets. Write your favorite one down here. Right, the favorite thing that you could make a little report about, and just write the topic down here, and then write the date you'd like to have this completed by. And I didn't put this in the assignment, but this date should be before this date, right? And again, no one's going to like freak out if you don't get it on the dates or anything. This is not, sorry. There we go. No one's going to freak out if you don't know how to use your own video like me. Here we go. All right. So the second one is bonding. So if you remember in the first assignment, you wrote down your topic, just write it down here. And then are you going to do a teleseminar or an audio recording? Or maybe you could do a video if you're really feeling fancy. But just circle whichever one you're going to do here. Or if you're going to make a video, you can write it down here if you feel like being advanced. And now write down the date you'd like to have this completed by. I think you know how the rest of the assignment goes, right? You do the same thing with your proof elements, where you wrote down 3 things you could create that would be proof magnets. Write your favorite one down here, and then write down the date you'd like to have it completed by. And then write down what you would give away as your sample, and then write down the date you'd have that completed by. And these should all be in sequence, right? Your interest and desire is first, your bonding is second, your proof is third, and your sample is fourth, and therefore the dates that you want them completed by should also be done sequentially as well. And then now we have a final thing we haven't talked about. If you remember, from the outline that I showed you with Ed, we had lots and lots of affiliates that we had written down. So I want you to do the same thing. I want you to, just on the final page here, I want you to write down a list of all the people that you would love to promote your stuff. Okay? Every single person that would just be so cool if they promoted your stuff. Doesn't matter if you know them. Doesn't matter if you're friends with them or if you're their competitor or whatever. Just write them down. And then when you get done writing them down, go back through every name and ask yourself, who does this person know? And if anything jumps out, you write that name down as well. The point is not to commit yourself to contacting every one of these people, but just to get your brain working to find out all the potential people that could possibly be your partners in promoting your business using Mass Control. And if you're new in a market and you don't know anybody or you don't know where to start or anything like that, just write down every single one of your competitors and write down every single one of their competitors. And do that on this sheet, and if you need an extra paper, use that too. I hope you use 100 extra pieces of paper and have lots and lots of potential partners, but I'd like you to have at least 50. Okay? That's not many, at least 50. And that is the end of these 2 assignments. So get to work, and I'll see you in the next section.